Happy Halloween and welcome back to Ghosties.
This is our bonus episode.
For Halloween. We want to tell some spooky stories. Oh, I'm Maci.
And I'm Nadoly.
And we wanted to tell some spooky stories for Halloween.
This is going to be a different type of episode. It's going to be a little shorter. It's not going to be researched. We went on the internet and we said, give me something scary. And so here it is to get you in the spooky mood for today.
Exactly. Ghost stories been told, I think, as early as like the ancient Romans. I think I read one day. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to continue that tradition and tell our stories.
Yep.
So today, the tea that we'll be drinking is called vanilla chai. Really excited to try this one.
Me too.
Let's pour the tea. A few years ago, I moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Melbourne, Australia. It was my first time living on my own. The apartment block had been built in the 1930s. I'd been there for a few months when I came home from work one day and went into the bathroom. I saw something strange. A wooden board, which had covered a hole in the ceiling that led to a small attic space, lay fractured in two pieces on the ground. I examined the pieces. The board was an inch thick, and it would have taken Bruce Lee to break it. I thought the landlord had sent someone to work in the attic. I was frozen stiff with fear. Someone is up there for sure, I thought. I emailed pictures to the landlord asking if anyone had been up there, with an undertone of annoyance since she hadn't warned me. Her reply read, "Please call me as soon as you are able to." I called and she explained that her last two tenants had said the same thing happened. She promised to replace the board, and she did. A month later, I woke up one night around 4 a.m. My body was covered in goosebumps. It felt like someone was rubbing his or her hands on me. Everything was silent, but then I heard a dragging sound coming from above my bed. It was as if someone was pulling a sack of potatoes. I froze, convinced someone was up there. There is no way an animal could make that sound. I worked up the courage to turn on the light, armed myself with a cricket bat, and walked to the bathroom. That's when I saw that the new board covering the hole was broken in two. I felt sick. The dragging sound had stopped, but I heard something else, whispering. The sound was clear and coming from the attic. It sounded like children's voices, and I could hear one sentence repeated over and over. "It's your turn. It's your turn." I switched on every light in the apartment to make things feel normal. It was 5 a.m. and dark outside. I watched TV to try to unwind, then a fuse blew. My pet budgie Dexter, whom I kept in the kitchen, usually never made a sound at night, but he started squawking like he was being strangled. I'd never heard him make that sort of noise. He was screaming. I grabbed my car keys, ran out, sat in my car, and waited there until the sun came up. When I saw people walking their dogs, this comforted me enough to go back in. The front door was open, but I figured I might have forgotten to close it when I ran out. I went to the kitchen to check on Dexter, but he wasn't in his cage. I felt sick again. All my windows were closed, so I looked everywhere inside. When I walked to the bathroom, I heard splashing. Dexter was half drowned in the toilet. I took him out, washed him, and dried him. I was so confused. At 8 a.m., I called the landlord and gave her a watered-down version of the night. "Oh, wow, you heard the whispering too," she said. I stayed in that apartment for another 18 months. I heard the whispering on a few occasions, and twice the board covering the hole in the ceiling moved. Although I live somewhere else now, the landlord recently called. She said that her new tenants had begged to speak to me about some of the stuff that's been going on there. Forget it. It's their problem now.
That is horrifying.
The whispering got me.
The whisper, I was just about to say, it's always the whispering, and it's always like when you're sleeping, because I feel like you're always vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's crazy, because the story that I have next has to do with sleeping and things that happen in your sleep, which
all right, let's go.
I don't even want to talk about, but we're going to talk about it because I read it and it scared me. This one is called The Woman of Your Worst Dreams.
I'm already scared.
Me too. In Brazil, a tall, skinny woman with long yellow fingernails and red eyes creeps along the rooftops and watches families inside their homes. She watches them as they sit at the table for dinner. She watches them while they eat. La pisadera. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry. After the meal, when someone goes to sleep on a full stomach, La pisadera sneaks into their bedroom. Then she sits on their chest so that they cannot move. The pisadera that has attacked them watches them as they begin to panic. The victim's eyes partly open, but they're neither fully asleep or fully awake, helpless and trapped in the body that won't move. Sleep paralysis is a well-studied disorder. Quote, "The worst thing is when you try to fight or call for help," a Redditor said in a conversation about what the experiences were like. "Your voice doesn't work and your body will not respond. You just feel helpless." And among those who suffer from it across many cultures, there is one unsettling common experience: a sense that a malevolent force is hovering over them in their immobile state. The earliest one I can remember is with my mother in the room, and she's sitting on my bed. Her face morphs into a demon-like thing, a Redditor shared in a thread on sleep paralysis, or a large dark figure, kind of a human silhouette, emerging from the foot of my bed and staring down at me. Could this person's mom, or all of these people's experience, be just a silhouette, or could it have been La Pisadera? So not much of a story, but it's one that
A creepy monster.
it got me. I didn't know there was a name for it, so I just wanted to share that. So apparently it's a thing.
She is the sleep paralysis demon.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was a thing.
We'll
I
have
thought
to talk about this more.
Did you know that?
No.
Oh.
We need to go into... Like, I've heard the name, but I didn't really go into much detail about it. We need to talk about this.
I knew about sleep paralysis. I've experienced it myself. But putting a name to it, I don't know why, gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
so-
like that.
That's my first one.
I will never eat a full dinner ever again.
I can't promise that, but I'll just won't sleep.
Okay, this is a good one. This is a feel-good one. I was 16 when I got my first SUV. It was a white 1989 Jeep Cherokee. I knew nothing about repairing cars, and a friend from high school used to help me fix it up. Soon we were four-wheeling and exploring whatever hills we could find. But whenever my friend wasn't around and it had a problem, my sister's boyfriend's brother would come over to fix it. He loved working on cars and always got it back up and running. It wasn't long after I got the Jeep, though, that Billy died on Halloween night 2009 in a rollover car wreck in a truck he had built with his family. Anytime after that, if my Jeep had a problem, I would park it overnight and complain to my family that it wouldn't start or had electrical issues or locking issues. I would wake up and the problems would mysteriously be gone as if someone fixed it overnight. The problems never came back. It was like Billy was still fixing things for me. One day, I was headed over to a friend's house alone on a dirt road that cut through 7 miles of woods. The dirt roads were slick after the rain, and I was going too fast, like 35 miles per hour. As I came around a corner, I felt the bottom part of the seatbelt being yanked on, like when you were a kid and you pulled the belt to mess with the person in front of you. It kept tugging on my waist, except the Jeep had no seatbelt pretensioners. I felt 3 hard yanks and began to slide into the dirt ditch. As the Jeep went up the right side of the 15-foot embankment just before striking a very large pine tree, a man in a white shirt sitting in the passenger seat yelled out, "Duck." As I struck the tree, the Jeep began to overturn at 30 miles per hour and the front right crumpled in. I hunched my body, hands under the steering wheel, ducking my head down, and the roof above my head collapsed. A speaker box weighing 25 pounds disconnected from the floorboard in the back and flew right past my head and smashed out the windshield, bouncing back and going out my driver window right by my head. Glass was flying everywhere. I'm now upside down sliding. It felt like a movie, a dream. It happened so fast. I feared my arm would pop out and get crushed under the car as it slid. The Jeep caught traction and rolled 180 degrees back onto its wheels, facing the other direction. Jeep still running, I was in shock, and I got out, turned off the engine. The blades were smacking engine parts, making a loud metal noise. I looked at the speaker box laying 100 feet away and crumpled roof right above my head, which surely would have broken my neck had I not ducked. Just mere cuts from flying glass on my arms and face. I remembered the face in the passenger seat, and it was Billy. That day, a guardian angel saved my life. I never told a soul who knew him. I didn't want to upset anyone. Thank you, Billy.
Oh my god.
I know.
I could honestly cry. That's so good. I wish I would have gotten something that made us feel good.
I know. Well, I thought I'd throw something in there.
Oh, and it's a Halloween. I love that. Aw, I mean, I don't love it, but
At least he was there to help her.
that's so sweet.
I know. My heart is like sad.
I love
and
that
happy.
one. Sad, yeah. Sad but happy. That's a good descriptor. Okay, to bring it back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
This one is called The Boy with No Eyes. One night when I was 10, I was woken up by my bedroom door opening, followed by someone sitting on my bed. I felt my leg grazed and the bed sink under a person's weight. It's just Mom, I thought, and I opened my eyes. It was not Mom. I found an eyeless boy. He had black empty sockets, about my age, sitting at the foot of my bed. He extended his hand, and in it was a little box. I was startled, but reached out. He pulled back. I reached again and said, "Give it." Then I blinked, and when I reopened my eyes, he was gone, but I could still see the imprint where he sat on my bed. Fast forward 5 years. My girlfriend came over to do homework. After she finished, she took a nap while she waited for her parents. When they arrived, I tried waking her up. She opened her eyes suddenly, looking up at a corner where the wall met the ceiling. She pointed there and went back to sleep. I shook her again. She came to full consciousness, and I explained what she'd done. She looked haunted. Up on the wall, I saw a little boy with no eyes. He was there in a Spider-Man pose, staring at me, I freaked out and told her my story about the same kid. Fast forward another 5 years. I was with the same girlfriend, and we had a 2-year-old. We were living in my parents' house in my old room. My daughter started waking up at the same time every night, and she'd talk. After a while, I noticed she had almost the same conversation every night. I playfully asked her whom she was talking to. She said, "It's a little boy. He's nice. He's lost and looking for his mommy." My daughter's nightly conversations continued until we got our own place later that year.
That one's kind of good, but also not.
Okay, good, because it's a kid. He's not doing anything. He's not hurting anybody. He just needs his mommy. But the no eyes.
The eyes, yeah.
There's something about, we're going to talk about black-eyed children, but there's something about the no eyes or the black eyes, things like that. That's what gets me.
Yeah.
That one freaks me out so bad.
This happened to me the summer I turned 11 and is one of the scariest, weirdest things I've ever experienced. I'd think it was a nightmare, except at the end, there was another witness. That summer, my parents sold our very regular one-story house and bought a much larger, incredibly unique house in the next town over. The architect who built it used all kinds of old reclaimed materials, and almost all of the windows were antique stained glass that came from England. The outside had wide, rough cedar planks instead of regular siding, and my brother and I learned early not to run our hands over them or we'd get splinters. It was the coolest house I've ever lived in. My room was also huge. It had its own bathroom and walk-in closet. There were 2 large stained glass windows facing out toward the street, but at an angle. These windows were deeply recessed under the roofline. It was Florida, and this kept the scorching hot sun from shining directly in any of the rooms. When we moved in, my mother put my bed against the inner wall facing the windows. Again, coolest, most beautiful, most original house I've ever lived in. Our parents didn't tell us about the house until the deed was done. Then they took us over there to see it, and we were so excited. It just seemed so huge and exotic and grand. We moved in, and my brother and I spent the summer exploring the neighborhood and trying to meet some kids, which we did. And when we did, we found out why our parents got a great price. The guy who built the house, who was a well-known local architect who'd built quite a few unusual, unique homes in the area, was also a convicted pedophile.
Oh my God.
He built the house we bought not long after he got out of prison for his wicked deeds. All the kids in the neighborhood knew about it from their parents, and when they found out which house we lived in, oh boy. Since no one lived in the house before us, what exactly was haunting it? I mean, it looked like it could be haunted, but it was also technically brand new, reclaimed materials or not. I also happened to read the Amityville Horror that summer. I've always loved scary stories, ghost stories, stuff that scares people, and never felt especially scared or freaked out myself. But for some reason, that stupid book scared the shit out of me, resulting in my developing some serious sleep issues that summer. It didn't help that we were in a huge, strange house that I wasn't used to yet. And also, because the house had so much wood inside and outside of it, that every room had a smoke alarm with a red light that was really noticeable at night. The one in my room was on the wall right next to the closet, and after reading that dumb book, I'd wake up in the middle of the night and see the red light and immediately think of Jody, the pig demon with the red eyes the daughter in the book saw, and I'd lay there thinking about the book and freaking out about the light. It usually took me hours to relax enough to get back to sleep. This happened almost every night. Then one night, I woke up needing to go to the bathroom, did it, got back in bed, and then laid there looking at the light and wishing for the millionth time I'd never read that book. It was after 2 a.m., the whole house was silent, and I was really not jazzed that the rest of my family was on the other side of the house. It wasn't that far in the daytime, but seemed like miles in the dead of night. Then I saw something in the window out of the corner of my eye, and holy God, there was what looked like a human head peering in the window at me. 2 stories up, a head looking in. Okay, this next part is difficult to write because it was so weird and I really don't like remembering it. The windows of my room were very large, a 2-part design where the larger lower half was a rectangle topped by a smaller sideways rectangle, intersected by a thick wooden frame. My mom put in shutters on the lower half and sheer curtains on the top half. Some parts of the window were clear like regular glass, some thick wavy glass, and some colored glass. When you looked through them, you get a distorted view of the outside, some clear and some not. So the head, or whatever it was, wasn't easy to see, except as a shape. It kept rising up above the shutter like it was trying to see into the room. Then it would sink back down. I have no idea how long it was doing that before I'd noticed. My first thought was that someone was standing on a ladder, trying to see inside. But if that was the case, then either the ladder was propped against the window glass below, or the person was very tall. But then the head shape did something so horrible, so strange, I almost screamed out loud. It had been peeping up from below the shutters like a regular person would, but then it disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was looking in from the side. Like whatever it was changed positions and was suspended sideways in the recess. which was impossible. All thoughts of weird dude on ladder flew right out of my head, and bad thoughts about demons and monsters flew in. I lay there in absolute terror, watching as the figure would appear and disappear, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right, and most horribly upside down, as if whatever it was on the roof, hanging over and looking in. Except again, these windows were in deep recesses, and the head was right next to the glass, meaning it was clinging, or God help me, floating, right outside. At some point, I realized I could hear it as well. It made faint scratching sounds as it moved around, sounding just like when squirrels scrambled up on cedar planks. I couldn't see any facial features, and it didn't look like it had hair, but it definitely had an oval-shaped head. I don't know how long I lay there, scared to death and watching this thing look in my room, but then, having no idea what was happening, my brother walked in to use my bathroom, which was especially welcome at the moment because it broke the strange spell. I screamed at the top of my lungs. The thing disappeared with a loud scratching noise like it had claws that slipped off the cedar planks, and my brother said, "What was that?" I started crying. "What was that?" my brother kept asking, and he was almost as shaken up as I was. He told me later that the minute he walked into the room, he knew something messed up was going on as the hairs on his arms stood straight up. I spent the rest of the night sleeping in his room on his spare twin bed. The next day, we went outside and looked all around, but there was no sign of anything. No marks in the ground if there was a ladder, no marks on the side of the house, no evidence at all that something had been crawling around my window trying to see in. We never told our parents. They weren't the kind of people who believed in the supernatural and would have dismissed it as a nightmare. And it was the kind of soul-scarring experience that would be made so much worse for being dismissed out of hand as imagination, when I knew it really happened. Nothing like that ever happened again. We lived in that house for years and everything was fine. But I wasn't taking any chances either. The next day I rearranged my entire bedroom so that my bed was now between the windows, and I moved my dresser and mirror to a position where the mirror didn't face the windows either, so I wouldn't wake up and see something looking in reflected in the mirror. I also put a piece of tape over the red light and the smoke alarm, which to my stepfather's annoyance, I told him it kept me up at night, which wasn't a lie.
I'm sick to my stomach.
Yeah, that would creep me out. Some kind of monster.
Oh, just
peeping
windows. Windows, anytime it's like,
I always keep
it
mine
was
covered.
looking at me through the window, I get sick. Like I got cold in the middle of that. My stomach turned. I don't feel good. I don't like that one.
I can't tell you how many times I go to open my curtains and think, please don't let anything be staring back at me.
Okay, stop.
Sorry.
Stop. Okay, that was terrifying. So I want to tell you about something that terrifies me that I've actually fairly recently became aware of, called mimics. I wasn't aware of them until recently, and now it seems to be all that is popping up, and it's taken up a lot of my brain, and I'm very scared.
I have a mimic story too, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, and we're gonna do a whole episode on that because weird occurrences have followed my family for years. I'm only gonna stick to the ones that can be classified as mimicking, starting from my first memory of it. My brother and I are 16 months apart, him being older. We shared a bedroom in a 2-bed apartment living with only our mom. We had those metal bunk beds that you could disassemble and turn into 2 toddler-like beds with the railing going around 3/4 of the bed. Before we got our own separate ends of the room, I had the top bunk and he had the bottom. My brother would cry a lot at night, and that's why he got the bottom, so he could easily get to my mom and vice versa. It was normal for his crying to wake me up. One night, I'll never forget though. I woke up to him crying, but he was trying to stifle it. I heard my own voice, calling his name in a whisper. I sat there, not understanding what was happening, and I slid my arm down the gap between the bed and the wall. He held my hand immediately, and we stayed like that until the sun came up. He told me that's why he cries at night. At this point, I was about 4, and he was turning 6. We never told Mom. When I got older, about 14, 15, I went through an angsty phase like most girls do. I had long, straight hair and was really scrawny. By this time, we were living in a different apartment. My brother and I had bedrooms at one end of the hallway, and the doors faced each other, with a bathroom in between. I used to sit on the edge of my bed, and when I did, you could see me in front of my door. On multiple occasions, my brother and Mom would see, quote-unquote, me, sitting in the spot while I would be in the bathroom or the kitchen. They would always be like, "Your twin is here again," and we'd go about our day. When I was in my senior year of high school, I went to an independent study program. It was almost a daily thing that I would hear my name being called while I was taking a test. The voice wasn't the same every time, but the tone was, like a sense of urgency. I never said anything because I honestly thought I was just insane. I'd look up and look around trying to see who was calling me, and no one around me acted like they heard a thing. A year later, I was enrolled in a trade school. I would hear my name being called there as well. I met a girl there who was openly practicing some form of Wicca. We became close. We went to school at night and got out around 8. Close to the end of our course, I was walking her out to her car from the dumpster enclosure on the parking lot. I heard my name being called. I wasn't going to act like I did, and my friend grabbed my hand and told me to never acknowledge it. I freaked out. I asked her if she heard something, and she said yes, that someone/thing was trying to be me. Another time, I was at my friend's house watching the Conjuring movie. It was only he and I in the house. We were sitting on the bed in his room with our backs against the wall. Okay, bear with me on this part. In my head, not out loud, I had this thought. But the thought wasn't my own inner monologue. My thought was more of hearing someone else's voice in my head. It was really ugly. To this day, I have bad vibes about it. In a really fast whisper yell, the voice said, "Look at the closet." My eyes darted towards his closet, and at that exact moment, one of the doors fell off.
No.
He had normal closet doors, the basic 2-panel kind. Only instead of the track they slide on being on the ground, his were on the top and the door hung about an inch off the ground. Seconds before the closet door fell, my friend had jumped. Nothing scary was happening in the movie. He preemptively acted spooked. We turned off the movie and we both were like, what the F? Things like this were common when we were together, and it made us have a strong bond. We talked for a second, rationalizing things, but then I decided to tell him about the ugly voice. He then changed his whole demeanor and looked at me and said, "I heard the same thing, only it was your voice." And I had said it so suddenly that it caused him to jump. Only, I never said a word.
I am unwell.
I know! Fast forward to 2 years ago, 2019. I had gotten a home for myself and lived with my newborn daughter and her father. It was summertime, and my baby daddy was in the backyard grilling. The sliding glass doors were open, but I have thick curtains that were drawn to keep the flies out. I was sitting on my couch with my daughter, sleeping in my arms while nursing. We had been like that when he went outside and told me to stay put. Usually I would go help him. My house is rather small, so no matter where you are, you can have a conversation with the other person, even if they're across the house. So he and I are talking, blah blah blah. I hear him say, "Okay, let's go inside." And I didn't think anything of it, assuming he was talking to himself or the food. I don't know. He walked in and looked at me still sitting on the couch with a look he always makes when he's confused. He asked me how I got back in that position so fast. If you've never seen a woman breastfeed a newborn, I don't know how to explain the logistics and mathematical equations that take place. But I told him I haven't moved and made a comment about my butt being asleep. He was really weirded out and shaking his head. He's very logical and a huge skeptic. Eventually, he was ready to tell me. He said I had been standing in the doorframe having the conversation with him face to face with my arm holding back the curtain, and that I had turned around and walked away when he said let's go inside. He was ready to give me an attitude for not holding the curtain for him while he carried in the food. I'm not sure what's going on, but that was the last quote-unquote double me encounter that I had.
I did not like that
Sickening.
at all.
I don't like it. I don't know what it is. I hate it. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I
read that alone today. I found that today. I read that alone.
Yeah.
That's when I called you at work. I said, I need you to be with me.
And now I understand. Okay, let's move on then. Fresh out of nursing school, I got my first real job in a fairly large hospital in a department that I honestly never thought I would ever work in. It was a 6-bed cardiac ICU with rooms that overlooked the city capitol building. It was a very nice unit, and I started out working 12-hour night shifts. The hospital I worked at had 4 other ICUs that were always full, so my unit always ended up being code bed, meaning if someone was arrested or went downhill fast somewhere around the hospital, they came to us. I had been working there for a year, and I was no stranger to death. Each patient of mine who had died on my shift was usually already on their way out. Their families were by their side, the DNR order was signed, the funeral home was already picked out. It was rarely ever a surprise. In fact, the only time I was ever needed to do CPR on my shift, it was not even in my department. So I went on a nice long 2-week vacation, got engaged, and had a beautiful tan. On my first night back, I received a report from the day charge nurse. She said she was off for a few days and suggested to remind the next day charge nurse that the priest was coming in the morning to bless room 4. I thought she was kidding at first, but she was serious. Apparently, while I was on vacation, every patient who was admitted to that room had died, but this came as no shock to me. People died often in our department, and it being a very religious institution, having a chaplain for almost every department, I just shook it off. Then she said that room 4 was empty and that it would serve as code bed for the night. Around 2 a.m., I got a call saying that they had someone to fill our open bed. The ICU downstairs was now going to be code bed, so we were getting your run-of-the-mill chest pain, take a look in the morning kind of patient. Nothing to get excited about. We get the patient admitted and all settled in room 4. He was a gentleman about 50 or so years old, very pleasant. His wife was with him and she looked dead on her feet. I got her some warm blankets and took her to our waiting room that had cots so she could get some rest. Around 3:30, I was watching the monitors of the cameras in each room. All the patients were fast asleep. The cameras all cycled through about 3 seconds each on one small TV we had on the desk. Room 1 was fine. Room 2 was fine. Room 3 was fine. Room 4. There was someone in there. It cycled too quickly for me to get a look, and the doors to the unit were locked. Maybe the other nurse let his wife back in. I walked down the hall and glanced inside. There was nobody. I shrugged it off. It was late. I was tired. I was probably just seeing things. I went back to the desk and continued watching the screen. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, Room 4. I was not imagining anything. There was someone in Room 4. The person was standing in the corner by the window, their figure completely draped in shadow. I could not move my body. It cycled through again. This time it was closer to the patient's bed by maybe 2 or 3 feet. The hair stood straight up on my neck. The next time it cycled through, it was even closer. It stood in the light coming from the hallway, but despite the light, it was still shrouded in darkness. It cycled through again, and it was right next to the bed. My heart started pounding, and I could barely squeak to the nurse on the other end of the desk. As soon as my words formed and I was able to make some kind of noise to get their attention, the alarm on the monitor went off, signaling that the patient was in cardiac arrest. The overhead system came on. A card is needed in CCU Room 4. People poured into the department. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists. They all rushed into the room, but I couldn't move. It cycled through the rooms again. Room 4 came up, and this time the lights were on, and there were 10 to 15 people surrounding the bed doing CPR and slamming meds into his IV. Someone went to get his wife from the waiting room, but there it was, in the opposite corner again, a dark figure watching the scene play out, just standing there. The man died of a heart attack. Room 4 was blessed that morning, right on schedule, and I put in my 2 weeks notice.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that one made me sad.
That's so sad. Oh my God. As soon as you said the run-of-the-mill chest pain, I said, oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sad. Okay.
Terrifying.
No.
Last story.
All right. Let's
Also
go.
a mimic. So
Oh God.
be prepared.
So we're going to end on terrifying. Let's go.
Per usual. This story takes place in 2007. My sister and future brother-in-law just had my nephew and moved into a rental home. The home was newer and located in a newer neighborhood. I was asked to babysit my nephew one evening. My sister and brother-in-law wanted to have their first evening out since the baby arrived, and I was happy to babysit. I came over and my sister went over some details and mentioned that she had a load of baby clothes in the dryer. She asked if I had the time to take out the clothes and fold them. They left to enjoy their evening, and 30 minutes later I heard the dryer sound, letting me know it is done drying. I scooped up my nephew and placed him in his crib. I went to the laundry room and took the clothes out and folded them. I placed all the clothes in a basket and placed the basket on the changing table. I took my sleeping nephew out of his crib and placed him inside his bassinet in the living room. I watched TV quietly for a while until I heard a loud bang come from the nursery, the room we were in earlier. I peeked into the bassinet and my nephew was still sleeping soundly. I quietly made my way over to see what made the noise and opened the door to the nursery. The laundry basket I had placed on the changing table was now on the other side of the room on the floor, upside down. The neatly folded baby clothes looked as though they had been tossed around. I quickly just picked up the basket and clothes and brought them back to the living room to refold. I was confused by the whole situation, but didn't want to ruin my sister and brother-in-law's evening and decided just not to mention the incident. The rest of the evening went smoothly. A few months went by and my sister asked if I could babysit for an evening. I agreed, and this time my mom joined my sister and brother-in-law as they were going to a casino. My nephew had been napping prior to their departure, and my sister said he would need to be fed when he woke up. My nephew woke up 30 minutes after they left, and I brought him to the kitchen and placed him in a chair as I prepared his bottle. Before I go into what happens next, my name is Angelina, yet everyone calls me Angie. My mother particularly only uses my full name when I was in trouble or she was angry with me. All in all, it's rare to hear my full name being used. Suddenly, I hear my mom yelling angrily from what seemed like the nursery. "Angelina, come here now." I yelled out, "Just a second, I'm in the middle of the baby's bottle." Then again, I heard my mom call out again, "Angelina, come here now." But now sounding like she was in the master bedroom. Frustrated and confused, I yelled back, "What is going on? 1 second." I picked up my nephew and went into the master bedroom, talking on the way to what I assumed was my mom, asking, "What's going on? Why are you so upset? What happened?" And walked into an empty room. I looked around and my mother was nowhere in the master bedroom. I looked in the nursery and it was empty as well. I looked throughout the rest of the home, guest bedroom, bathroom, and garage, and eventually checked the driveway for cars and only saw my car. I came back inside and called my mom. I said, "Hey, did you guys come back and forget something?" And my mom answered with a confused, "No, why?" To which I responded, "I just heard a bit ago, you sounded upset." And she responded, "I don't know what you're talking about. We've been on the road for over 30 minutes now." My stomach immediately sank. Once again, I didn't want to ruin their evening and just told her it must have been the television, even though it was off the entire time. After I hung up, the doorbell immediately rang. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest, and I quickly walked to the door. I almost opened the door without checking, thinking that my mom was just pulling a prank and she was going to be at the door. I paused for a moment and decided to look out the peephole. No one was outside. I opened the door to peek out to see if there was a car in the driveway and still only saw my car. I instantly got this overwhelming sense of dread. No one was visibly outside, and from where that house was located, you could clearly see the street in both directions. I never mentioned any of these incidents to my sister until she moved out of the rental home. As I was helping her move, I noticed that she had moved my nephew's crib into the master bedroom. I asked her why she had moved the crib into her room, more to see if my nephew had any sleep issues. What she told me was completely unexpected. She said around Halloween, she had bought a black light and had plugged it in the nursery. The room instantly lit up with what she described as a huge, concentrated stain in the middle of the room with handprints going up the walls. She immediately just felt very uncomfortable and moved the crib into her bedroom that night. I told her what had happened the first time I watched my nephew, and she opened up that strange things were happening in the house and was the main reason she was moving. She was experiencing lights flickering in the home, the doorbell ringing and no one was at the front door, and hearing voices. She said the landlord offered to lower the rent if they signed a year lease. She said the landlord told her that he was having issues keeping tenants in the rental and that she was the only tenant who'd stayed the longest. She refused the offer and moved. I always wondered if anything happened in that home and wish I did investigate the home further. I absolutely hate that whatever was in that home mimicked my mother's voice.
When you started saying like the angry like, "Angelina, come here now." I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. That is so scary.
That's like the fourth time I've read that and my heart's pounding.
When we talk about mimics more, I have more to say, but I'll save that for the episode because we could talk for a while. Mm-hmm. But I think that's our Halloween episode.
Happy Halloween! Woo! Hope we scared you a little bit and got you in the mood.
A little bit. Yeah, I'm scared.
I'm a little scared.
I'm more than honest, a little.
But we appreciate you taking the time to listen to our episode, watch our episode wherever you are in your life right now. We'll be putting up new episodes, podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts and YouTube videos every Monday. You can check us out on YouTube or Instagram at Ghosteas Pod. Please rate and review our podcast wherever you're listening. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. And on YouTube, also, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. Also leave a comment.
Notification bell, if you please.
All the things. And share if you feel like you need to. If you have a creepy encounter or anything you just can't explain, please let us know. You can send us a DM on Instagram or you can email us at ghosteaspod@gmail.com. Maybe you'll hear your story on a future episode. We'd love to do some kind of listener stories. We're excited to continue.
Yep. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
Bye.